gentlemen, the Brit Pack is back. Simon Head bringing you episode number 12 of the MMA podcast with a distinctly British flavour. Now, my buddy Sandhu isn't with me right now, but he was with me at Octagonside at UFC 204, and that's what we're going to bring you right here, right now, on the Brit Pack. Please bear in mind, it's loud. It was loud in that building. The atmosphere was crazy. Compare it with Dublin, compare it with Glasgow, compare it with the big Conor McGregor fights, because it really was that electrifying in the arena in Manchester on Saturday night. We'll bring you live reaction, or it was live when we recorded it, between the fights at UFC 204, and then after the fights, my buddy Sandhu sat down with Mike Barn of MMA Junkie and Rolling Stone, and the daddy of them all, Mr. John Morgan of MMA Junkie and the MMA Roadshow, to get some post-fight reaction from them as we wrapped up UFC 204. It's a fun show this week. Check it out.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Brit Pack at Octagonside at UFC 204. Simon Head, Sandhu, and we're a few fights in, Sandhu.
Yep.
We've had a few pretty successes, and we've had one or two Brits who haven't quite been able to get that W. Mike Perry versus Danny Roberts. What a fight!
I can't believe it. One of the best fights I've ever seen in person, and got to take your kind of hat off to both lads. Just unbelievable stuff. Danny Roberts was pretty much saved by the buzzer in both the first and second rounds, but showed so much heart and grit and determination to stay in the fight. Mike Perry, I think his next facial tattoo needs to be iron across his chin, because he has got an iron chin. But I have to say, the referee should have, waved it off and stepped in a little bit earlier. Roberts unfortunately took a few shots that perhaps he didn't need to, but that aside, it was an amazing fight, and Mike Perry continues to impress in one way or another. I mean, people were saying that maybe perhaps he didn't have what it took to go the distance in a fight, but he proved that he can do it. And like you said, unfortunately for the British contingent, not a good night for Danny Roberts, but the following fight, Mark Diakiese, unbelievable debut. What were your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, Mark Diakiese, we've been high on this guy ever since he exploded his way to the BAMMA lightweight, the BAMMA British lightweight title. He went in there against Lucas Zajeski, tried to get that spectacular early KO, ended up getting taken down and was held down for a long time in that fight. He had to overcome some adversity in that fight, show some good defensive grappling skills, stayed safe on the mat. Then when he got back up to his feet, it was time to start showcasing those striking skills he had. And Zajeski is a tough, durable guy who really hung in there way longer than a lot of lightweights would have done, perhaps. Very, very difficult assignment. More difficult than Diakiese probably thought it was going to be, in fairness. In hindsight, that is exactly what he needed. He needed a little bit of adversity. He needed to be given a real test. He got that test from Zajeski and got the TKO win with a really, really nice TKO stoppage. We also saw Leon Edwards, Sandhu, against Albert Tumanov. Both know the strikers, but it was Leon Edwards grappling that got the fight done.
Absolutely, and again, I think he's just now trying to showcase his all-round game. I think Leon Edwards historically has been known as a really good striker, but to take Tumanov back the way he did and think in that rear naked choke, excellent stuff there. And Davey Grant's about to walk out, Simon.
Yeah, the fights are coming thick and fast here in Manchester. We are 4 fights in. We won't talk about the first fight. It sucked. We got Davey Grant versus Damian Stasiak. Then we got Brad One Punch Bigger against Yuri Alcantara. And then we're into the main card. Pektic versus Doan. Steph from Skyscraper Street versus Daniel Obilanchuk. OSP Hogan Sabru taking on London's own Jimmy the Poster Boy Manoa. Vitor Belfort versus Dagon Assassin. And then the one fight that everyone in this arena is there for, Michael Bisping against Dan Hendo Henderson for all the marbles at UFC 205.
One thing, Simon, I think you'll agree with this as well. Oh my God, why are boys just playing? Shout out to Mega Prokop, but the arena has been electric. It's about 2 o'clock right now, 2 a.m. But the support the British fighters have been getting from the fans in the arena here has been incredible. They're so loud, and if anyone thought that the late night element of the card might have an effect on people's mood and emotions, certainly not.
No, I mean, normally the stands are normally part
be back.
All right, well, back. We've just had the conclusion of the UFC 204 prelims here in Manchester. And what a roller coaster ride we've got. If you're supporting the British fighters here in the UFC, we're getting good wins, we're getting crushing losses. Talk to us about some of those fights that we've just seen.
Yeah, I mean, well, the fight that we just saw right now was Brad Pickett versus Yuri Alcantara. And my God, Alcantara did pretty much anything and everything he wanted to. Stood with him, hit him, took him down. Unbelievable transitions on the ground, and got that arm triangle finish at the end there. And you know, I mean, Pickett, pioneer, legend of UK MMA, but he's only won one fight in his last 6 now, I believe. And at 38 years of age, you have to wonder if he should be doing this anymore, to be honest. And if the UFC will even keep him around. But not a good night for Pickett. Prior to that, Davey Grant, again, from the British perspective, you know, not good for him. But in terms of the fight itself, you know, I thought he was doing some really good work there. You know, against Stasiak, really getting into the body. And I think if he'd done a bit more of that, that could have got him through to the win there. But my God, Stasiak put this armbar on him, and I thought for a second that Grant was going to do the Dan Hardy and just somehow managed to stick and survive. But
he stayed in there, didn't he? He did in there. It was... In the post-fight interview, Stasiak said that he felt Davey Grant's arm break not once, but twice. So at that point, you knew the fight was going to get stopped. Davey Grant is one tough man. And for me, he was winning that fight. He went in an early storm, he came storming back in the second round, and looked like to be cruising to a decision win. Stasiak is a gritty operator though. He got that armbar on and he did not let it go. He was like a dog with a bone with Davey Grant's arm.
yeah.
And Grant did not want to tap. He had to in the end, and you just hope he doesn't have a long-term injury there. That looked really nasty. That concludes the prelims. Well, let me run you through the results. Brad Pickett losing to Yuri Alcantara by triangle choke. Damian Stasiak defeating Davey Grant by armbar. Leon Rocky Edwards, with for me one of the performances of the night so far, to submit Albert Einstein Tumanov, very highly rated, submitted him in the 3rd round. Mark Diakese off and running in his UFC career, beating Luka Sajewski. Mike Perry beating Danny Roberts by vicious knockout in what, for me, for you, and for UFC boss James Elliott, is the fight of the night so far. James just called past the desk here on Fresh Road. He said, if that doesn't win fight of the night, then boy are we in for one hell of a fight on the main card tonight. Leonardo Santos beat Adriano Martins in the early fight. I said earlier, it sucked. It really blew. We won't talk about that. Main card, Mirsad Bektic up next against Russell Doe. Then we've got a whole list of incredible fights, culminating in Michael Bisping versus Stan Henderson for the UFC middleweight title. The atmosphere here is building. The arena has been full since 2 a.m. And it's only going to get louder, bigger, and better.
It's almost 3 o'clock in the morning. Me and Simon are on our Red Bull now. We've got some peanut M&Ms, trying to keep that sugar energy levels high, keep us going. But the performances themselves have been keeping us awake. It's some great MMA action here in Manchester. The crowd have been absolutely top class. The arena's been pretty much packed from the very first fight. They know their MMA. They've been really getting behind the British fighters as expected. There was somebody naughty in the crowd who took Brad Pickett's hat as he was walking out. So maybe look out for that on eBay come Monday morning. But yeah, I think the momentum and the crescendo is building and building until Michael Bisping walks out the very first British UFC champion, and I can't wait.
It's going to be awesome. We'll come back with some instant reaction at the conclusion of that fight. It is going to be loud in here. So we'll be back to you in a little bit. ladies and gentlemen, your UFC middleweight champion is still Michael the Count Bisping. Shamakar Sandhu, what an unbelievable roller coaster of a fight. There weren't many fans sitting in their seats during that contest. It was drama. There was a comeback element. Michael Bisping looked done twice in that fight, and he came back twice and retained his championship. We thought we'd seen it all with the Anderson Silva fight earlier this year. He came back and did it again. Michael Bisping, unbelievable.
I just tweeted out this fight, this main event had all the makings of a Hollywood movie. Such drama, such emotion. There's so many things to dissect and talk about. Hendo landed the H-bomb twice in round 1 and round 2, almost finished Bisping. Bisping then somehow got the energy and the guts and the determination to come back in this fight. Stuck to the game plan, kept picking him apart. You know, we all know how much output he has. Got the judges' scorecard in his favour. I personally have scored it a draw. Looking online, you had some of our fellow media journalists score it for Hendo, some scored it for Bisping. He got the result tonight. You can't argue with it. I think either which way, there would have been no problem from me if he had scored it for Bisping, for Hendo, or give it a draw. But he got the job done. Bisping is still the champion. He cut a hell of a promo. That's how it's done. He just destroyed Jacare and Rockhold and Weidman and Romero. That's how it's done. When you've got the spotlight, when Brian Stann is asking you the question, that's how you deliver a promo. He's a class act. He's a veteran of the sport, and you want to get the blueprint. That's how you can carve out a top-level career in the UFC.
Absolutely. For the record, I scored it for Michael Bisping. I gave him rounds 2, 3, 4, and 5. I gave Henderson a 10-8 in the first round. That's what kept it close on my scorecard. 48-47 on my card. And I suspect that might be how a lot of the judges scored that. I'd be interested to see how the scorecards come out. We get sent those by email, so we'll actually see the breakdown round by round of how those rounds were scored. Bisping is now indelibly put on his record the fact that he's just a guy who can take adversity, come scream back, and come out the other side a victor. That, for me, may even have eclipsed the Anderson Silva performance. I agree. For me, that fight had everything. You can't also underestimate the role that the Manchester crowd here had to play.
Absolutely.
It's emptied out really, really quickly. There are going to be a lot of people having a celebratory breakfast this morning because, as we speak, it is 25 to 6 in the morning. The noise in this crowd, people talk about Dublin, people talked about Glasgow, people talked about Cleveland even, for an incredible atmosphere. Conor McGregor fights in Vegas, notoriously good atmosphere. The atmosphere in here was right up there with the best of them, and we saw one of the all-time great atmospheres, one of the all-time great come from behind performances, because that's what it was from Michael Bisping. He had his back against the wall after that first round, and he bit down on his mouthpiece. He came fighting back, and that is why Michael Bisping is still your UFC middleweight champion of the world. Incredible night of fights, Sandhu. Aside from the main event, if you were picking out one particular fight that really stood out to you, what would it be?
Well, it's got to be the poster boy, Jimmy Manuwa from London. You know, we all know he's a powerful striker, and you know, he's needed that kind of signature victory. OSP, Obain St. Preux, just fought the greatest of all time, in my opinion, and he took him all the way.
With a broken arm.
And this is a pay-per-view main card spot for Jimmy Manuwa. And he destroyed him. He absolutely knocked him out cold. Highlight reel knockout, one of the best of the year. He'll probably get a performance with a bonus for that. If I'm being quite honest, a bit of a shame that he didn't call somebody out. And again, I'll go back to what Bisping did there at the end. You had some moments in the night where Brian Stann was giving the fighters an opportunity when they just got a really big win. Stefan Struve's another one, you know, to call somebody out, and they didn't take that opportunity. And you know, fair play to them. If that's how they want to, you know, use that time, it's all down to them. But from our point of view, you know, that's how you can generate interest and really build your name and get some of the big pay-per-view, big name, you know, fights here in the UFC. Gegard did a great job calling out Anderson Silva in his post-fight interview. But yeah, for me, performances aside from Bisping, obviously, Jimmy Manuwa's knockout was just ridiculous.
Yeah, and just a little note from me on Jimmy. He's probably the one fighter I've watched more than any other, just through
coincidence that the domestic shows that I used to cover back in the day, Jimmy Manuel was a major player on those shows, getting lots of big knockout finishes. And I've spoken to him on more than one occasion and said that big highlight reel knockout will come. To believe in it, it will come. And boy did it come this weekend. Amazing performance from Jimmy, the poster boy Manuel. Standout performances for me there were two others. Martin Diakiese had to overcome some adversity today. I think he thought he was going to go in there and blow Lucas Sajewski out of the water. Found himself in a little bit of trouble in that first round, dealt with it, showed some maturity, came back stronger, and learned from his early mistake, lit him up and won. And a big thumbs up to Leon Rocky Edwards. You talk about all the British stars in the UFC. Leon is a very quietly spoken guy. He doesn't make a lot of waves on social media.
He does all his talking in the octagon, trust me.
He gets his head down, works hard, trains at one of the best gyms in the UK, UTC up there in Birmingham, and you can see what it's doing for his game. I mean, he came into the UFC known as a striker, but he's got a ground game about him now. He used his wrestling to beat Dominic Waters, and he used his jiu-jitsu to beat Albert Tumenov today. Really impressive. And Albert Tumenov's a guy who a lot of people, the other side of the channel in particular, have been really high on.
Absolutely.
He put him away in impressive fashion. Great performance from Leon Rocky Edwards. The music has stopped here in the Manchester Arena.
It's crazy. It's almost
nice,
6 o'clock in the morning.
It's nice and calm. It's too loud. It's too loud.
Normally it's the calm before the storm, but we had a storm now with the calm.
God, did we? So what we're going to do now, we're going to pack things up here, get our reports done, and we're going to head back to the press room for the press conference. We'll grab some post-fight reaction back there, and we will speak to you very, very soon.
Right, so it's past 10 o'clock in the morning here on Sunday, post UFC 204, and let's be honest, the Brit pack is running on fumes. We're pretty tired, so I've managed to collar my Canadian Commonwealth colleague for MMA Junkie and Rolling Stone, Mike Bond, who's been here covering UFC 204 all week long. And Mike, you're just an hour or two away from flying home, but your instant reaction first of all to UFC 204, the event, especially the main event, where obviously Michael Bisping got his hand raised in victory.
Yeah, spectacular event overall. I mean, that's really all you could ask for. I was worried that with the late start time and everything, that if this event dragged at all with bad fights or a bunch of decisions in a row or something, that the crowd would get super restless and kind of take away from it. But it was great. I mean, we had a decision in the first fight of the night, then 9 finishes in the row leading up to the main event, and then you got a highly competitive 5-round, fight that'll probably, it's not fight of the year or anything, but I think it probably will be on the top 10 kind of list towards the end of the year. It was just a great fight between Bisping and Henderson. I thought Dan Henderson won watching it, in person, not on a television monitor and not with commentary or anything like that. So I was a little bit further away. I was in the auxiliary seating for that main event. And, it's kind of harder to see there. It seemed like Henderson was landing some good stuff, but it's harder to tell if Bisping's slipping it. It's just more difficult to see, but in person I thought Henderson, undisputably won the first round. You could even say that was a 10-8. I just scored a 10-9, and then the second round I thought the knockdown got Henderson the round again, and then Bisping kind of did what he does in the third and the fourth. His resiliency, the fact that he even came back and was still pressuring Henderson, walking forward nonstop. The fact that he got dropped and nearly knocked out twice in the first 2 rounds didn't make him more timid at all, didn't have him backing down, which is super impressive if you're just trying to take positives away from Bisping's performance. But then I thought Dan Henderson took that 5th round. I know he didn't really do anything with the takedown he got, but he did get Bisping to the ground. He controlled him for a little bit of time, and I just thought he was a little bit more active in that fight. And I think a lot of that had to do with the break he got from the low kick that we saw. I believe that was in round 4. Mm-hmm. And after that, Dan Henderson seemed to have a lot more energy to come out in the latter portion of that round, and then the 5th. And I thought he won, but the judges didn't see it that way, unfortunately, and would have been great to get that storybook ending. But at the same time, you have Michael Bisping, who is continuing his storybook ending or run to this portion of his career. So probably the best case scenario for the UFC. You don't really want Dan Henderson winning the belt and then just leaving it behind to vacate it right away. So all things considered, I'm glad it went down the way it did, just because Dan Henderson, it would have sucked to see him get starched in the first round or have one of those performances where he just didn't look good at all. So I think for everyone involved, probably a pretty positive situation. And Dan Henderson, of course, bummed out he didn't get the title, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, the scorecards are something that's definitely going to be debated. And I suppose for me personally, I scored it a draw. But I have no problem if you scored it for Bisping or for Henderson, or if you scored it a draw. I think those are all viable options the way you judge the fight. Something I did want to speak to you about, and it's the post-fight interview with Michael Bisping inside the Octagon. And obviously, he just absolutely cut a hell of a promo on Rockhold and Romero and Jacare and Weidman. And it was kind of a running theme throughout the night where we had, these guys that were, having a massive performance, getting a big victory. Brian Stan literally laying it up for them to call somebody out, give them a name, and they didn't take that opportunity. And then you had adversely Michael Bisping once again leading the way, showing how it's done. What have you made of the situation with regards to fighters who do call out names and they don't call out names? And what's your general thoughts on that anyway?
I think you should have a plan in some case, but for everyone to just say like everyone should have a name that they should call like this and that, it just doesn't work that way. I mean, you have a guy like Prasad Bekdik, who I think probably stands out in that group. He got that huge first round submission win over Russell Doane, and then he gets asked who he wants to fight next, and his speech, like, he tried a little bit, Dana White, give me my chicken, or whatever he said there, and it's just like, then people are making fun of him on social media, or being like, how bad is this? He's not good at this. So it's not everyone's thing, like, we can't expect all these guys to be Conor McGregor or Michael Bisping or anyone that's just, even like a Mickey Gall, who had his plan in mind for Sage Northcutt. Like, not everyone's going to be able to do that and be able to line up a fight for themselves that makes sense. So I think if we just had the point where, I know it's the job of the interviewer who's going into the octagon, whether it's Joe Rogan or Brian Stan or John Anik or whoever, to ask these guys, what do you want next? But for us to sit there and say, all of them should know. These guys just got in a fist fight too, right? Like, that's what makes Bisping so impressive. The fact that he was probably concussed, almost knocked out twice in the fight, and then he goes in and can lay down a speech like that. That's why Michael Bisping is one of a kind in the sport. But if everyone's doing that, it just kind of takes away some of the specialness and what's so impressive about a guy like McGregor or Bisping or whomever. So I think you got to have room for both. I don't think we should be so hard on some of these guys. I mean, if you're beating like a top 5 guy or whatever, like Musashi, say for example, beats Vitor Belfort, and he knows exactly what he wants, even if it's fights that don't make sense. Anderson Silva, who knows what's going on with him right now? I mean, he's saying that he's pissed at the UFC, they're not treating him that well, or there's rumors he could fight GSP. So there's all that stuff going on, and then Uriah Hall, who I think Musashi's well beyond at this point, but I understand why he wants that one back. So it's kind of a mix, but at least have some. I think you should have some plan, but at the same time, there's just so many guys in the UFC, so many fights. I don't think we can expect that out of everyone. One
of the running themes of the week was the start time, right? 3 o'clock main card start locally here, and it's going to be weird because you flying over from Toronto, I think for you it's kind of been a case of just trying to maintain the same North American time zone that you're used to. Whereas for us locals here in England and Europeans flying over, it's been a case of adjusting to the North American time zone. I think we've just about made it here come the night of the fight, and now we're probably going to have to spend 3 or 4 days getting back, used to our own local time zone here in the UK. Let me ask you about the crowd, the atmosphere. What were your thoughts coming in? You've been to quite a few shows now, North America and Brazil as well. What were your thoughts in regards to what were you anticipating the crowd to be like, and what do you think of them overall throughout the night?
I thought they were awesome. I mean, from the beginning of the first fight of the night, it seemed like there was already 80-90% of the people in attendance. So that's all you can really ask out of a crowd to show up for the first bout. And I know it was later in the night, so I think a lot of people probably went out for dinner or drinks or whatever, then came to the fights with already a few beverages in them, but they didn't seem too negative. They didn't seem too raucous. There wasn't fights breaking out or anything like that. I think some people were expecting it to be that way. They were great. I mean, they weren't really given many reasons to be a poor crowd. They got a very entertaining card. Pretty much every fight delivered except for maybe the first bout between Leonardo Santos and Adriano Martins. Yeah. It's late. So I think other than that, I mean, the card gave them no reason to act in a bad way, and they were awesome. I mean, going into the main event, they were singing, Bisping's walkout song, and they were chanting along with Bruce Buffer during the introductions, and minus what I saw, I think, because I was out there in the crowd area for the main event, and I think when Bisping got dropped the first and second round, people were throwing throwing glasses and throwing their beers and stuff. And at that point, I was sitting in the crowd, and I just got out of there, and I went up to like the top of the entrance where it was covered, because I knew, I'm like, Bisping gets knocked out here, like this is going to be a lot more, and I don't want beer getting thrown on my brand new suit and all this stuff. So, but other than that, they were awesome. They were super loud, energetic. I did talk to a couple people when I was out there. I was like, how are you guys feeling right now? Like, are you from here? They're like, we're good. We're all good. So they, it's not ideal. I wish that you guys could get the fights on your normal time, because I know that everyone is forced to stay up and watch all these North American events or Brazilian events super late. So it's unfortunate that when they come to your market, they can't cater to you. But I understand why the UFC does it. Of course, their pay-per-views are catered towards the North American time. So I thought, for what it was, a spectacular crowd in Manchester. I think they'll definitely be back again, especially if Bisping can hang on to that title for 1 or 2 more fights. They could bring him back easily.
Well, look, Bisping and Henderson are definitely going to dominate all of the headlines, and rightly so. It was an instant classic of a fight with, all the makings of a Hollywood classic, drama, high emotion, and tension, all sorts of stuff going on. But to try and remove yourself from the main event just for a split second, is there one story this week, a fighter, a performance tonight, or an actual fight that for you sticks out more than the others?
I think in terms of performances, Jimmy Manuwa was unreal. He absolutely starched OSP in that second round, and for him, I think we talked to him. I think everyone kind of has similar questions. His UFC run just hasn't been ideal. Got off to a good start. I think he won 3 in a row, but they're just kind of weird endings, unfulfilling endings. Whether it's a doctor's stoppage or a guy calling the fight when he's still on the stool in between rounds, just hasn't been the most emphatic of victories. And this one, we know exactly what he's capable of. OSP coming off going 5 rounds with John Jones in an interim title fight. I think a lot of people, thought he moved up a little level, even losing that fight, and Manuwa came in there and took all his shine. So I think right there, the light heavyweight division, even though Manuwa, I believe, is 36 years old, needs all the faces, competitive fighters, highlight reel producing guys it can get, and Manuwa is right up there. And his only 2 career losses are to Anthony Johnson, Alexander Gustafsson. There's nothing to be ashamed of there. So he's a guy that if he can stay healthy, if he can fight consistently, I'm very interested to know what he's capable of. And then on top of that, you got to mention Gegard Mousasi. From day one this week, even just the past few months, he's really, really coming out of his shell. Isn't hesitant to drop an F-bomb, call, the rankings stupid, just say anything he wants. That guy is hilarious, and the complete opposite of when we used to see him come into the sport, or earlier in his days, people said, he never smiles, and now it's like he's never not smiling. So yeah, Mousasi is awesome. I remember just being a fan of him back when he was fighting in Dream and in Strikeforce, and I was wondering if he'd ever make it to the UFC. And he's here. He had a couple ups and downs to start his run. The losses to Machida and Jacare and stuff, but now it seems like he's really rolling. He's won 4 in a row. I think he's finished 3 of those. So he's a guy that, as long as he keeps this going, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him in a title fight very soon. It's just the middleweight division is kind of tough right now with all these big matchups. It seems like he's the odd man out. So if I were him, I would just, it doesn't really seem like he took any damage tonight. I'd get right back in the gym and prepare myself in case either Chris Weidman, Yoel Romero, Jacare, Luke Rockhold, Derek Brunson, or who am I mind blanking here? Robert Whittaker gets injured in those upcoming fights, and he could slide right in there, and then he wins that, and now we're talking.
I want to end on this with you, Mike. Dan Henderson, that's it. It's over. Yeah. The guy is a legend of the sport. He's going into retirement now. I guess it's kind of hard to kind of really kind of go into an essay mode and kind of talk about his career, but just your initial thoughts on what his legacy is in the sport, and how do you think he'll be remembered as an MMA fighter?
Yeah, it's I'm a little bit sad. I've had the chance now. I think I was at Randy Couture's fight. I was at Chuck Liddell's last fight. I was at what I thought was BJ Penn's last fight. It seems like he might be having one more now. And the BJ Penn one was really sad because he just got crushed in that fight, and he was like crying and stuff, and it was very depressing. But this one was depressing on another angle because I thought Henderson should have won the fight. I thought he should have had his fairy tale moment. The UFC belt is the only thing that's eluded him. He got that tournament championship back at UFC 17, I think it was, and then of course the Pride belt in 2 divisions, the Strikeforce belt. Just an amazing career, a career that 99% of fighters could only wish and dream that they could have, and it would have been just the perfect end to it if he had got that title tonight. But it didn't go his way, and what does he mean to sport? He's a guy that fighters forever are going to try to use as an example and inspiration of, even if it's maybe not the most positive thing, of, hey, like, Dan Henderson could fight into his mid-40s, like, why can't I do that? And maybe some guys are setting that as a pinnacle that is unreachable because they just want to keep going when they're in a tough spot in their career. But Henderson did it. He always did it right. He was absolutely classy in victory or defeat every time out. It seemed like it was going to be a very ugly end to his career when he was losing. I think he lost to Musashi and then Vitor Belfort in a row, and they were like, the stoppages were coming. He was known forever for being such a durable guy, and then finally those knockouts started to come, the more decisive losses, and you're like, man, how is this going to end for Dan Henderson? Like, this does not seem like it's going to be a pretty finish to his career. It seems like he's going to be pushed out the door by the UFC, by whomever, by his team, and it didn't go that way. He managed to get the win he needed against Hector Lombard, set up this title shot, and he went out on his terms. And as a combat sports athlete, I think that's all you can really ask for. It wasn't the perfect ending with that title, but still, like, very good. He was just a hair short of being the champion. So I think he said he can live with it. If he can live with it, we should all be able to live with it. So Henderson, we should all be thanking him for his service. I hope the UFC gives him the job he's looking for. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I think he's one of those guys that deserves it. He can be a very good role model and teacher to fighters that are coming up in the sport. He's been doing it for 2 decades, pretty much been through every era, from no rules to Pride rules to UFC rules to it all. So I think we should all be thanking him, and he's absolutely a Hall of Famer. Hopefully they give that to him sooner than later, and hopefully he gets his job and he's very happy in post-fighting life. It seems like he has a beautiful family, a beautiful wife. Seems like he's made some good money. So I think Dan Henderson's career is one that every fighter should aspire to even match by 50%.
Well, look, Mike, it's been great to be with you again on a fight week. It's been a lot of fun. Yep. I guess I'm going to see you in New York, and then and your European tour isn't ending in 2016. You're going to be back over on this side of the pond for the Belfast card, right?
Absolutely, and that should be fun too. I don't think we'll get the grabbiness from our Dong Young Kim Gunnar Nelson main event, but that should be a good fight, and there's some other good matchups on there as well. And of course 205 is going to be, we don't even need to talk about that. It basically says it all for itself.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate you jumping on board the show this week and helping us out, and safe travels home.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Alright, so like I said, on this week's episode of the Brit Pack, we need some help. Me and Simon, we can't get it done ourselves. We're running on fumes. We've had to adjust to the North American time zone, so we had to get some North American journalists to help us out. Already spoke to Mike Bond. Now I'm being joined by my good friend and colleague, MMA junkie, John Morgan. John, you've been around for a lot of UFC events around the world in various time zones. What was it like watching a main card kick off at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Oh, man, this was crazy. You're right. I have seen some weird ones early in the morning, sometimes late night. Brazil's done a couple that have run pretty late. I think I remember, like, Aldo Mendes walking to the cage at, like, 4 o'clock or something like that. So it was unique. But I thought what I was a little worried about is if the crowd energy would be there, if maybe they'd be a little too tired or a little too drunk or whatever else. And they delivered, man. So it was a weird week all week because it kind of wasn't that hard physically because it was basically just staying on American time. But it's just still weird to do that when you're, like, sleeping during the day and staying up at night and all that. So it was kind of a bizarre week from start to finish, but tonight was amazing.
Yeah, I think the closest that I've come to experiencing something like this was a Stockholm event. I think it was a year or two ago now. And I think that ended around 3, I want to say, maybe 3 or 4.
With a very quiet Swedish crowd, as I recall.
Yeah. The Manchester fan base and the crowd here was totally the opposite. Let's talk about that for a second. When Bisping walked out, and obviously Bisping had the ups and downs going through his fight, and the crowd were just really getting behind him. How are you taking that all in?
Dude, it was phenomenal, man. The entire atmosphere was amazing. It was, kind of reminiscent in some ways of the Anderson Silva fight earlier this year, where it was just the ups and downs, and Mike having to really fight through stuff and show his heart and show his character. So I thought that was pretty amazing to see. But yeah, it was not. For him to be knocked down and then for Hendo to leap forward in the exact – it looked like a carbon copy of UFC 100. but it just not quite land. And for him to battle up, I mean, the energy that was in there when he made his way to his feet was awesome. And then, round 2 to get dropped again, it's like, oh, God, how does he do this? But kept finding a way to do it, and the crowd was supporting him and cheering him on. And just amazing, man. It really was an amazing energy, amazing atmosphere. And, the cheers and the chants and the support is – it's reminiscent of like a soccer crowd, a football crowd.
Right.
And we still never get those in the States. You know what I mean? We don't get that stuff. So it's like a unique atmosphere, and I dig it.
You know what, John? You have been covering the sport longer than anybody else I know. Wax poetic on Dan Henderson for me right now.
Dan Henderson's the man, dude. I mean, just I say that and pretty confidently, honestly, I think he's the greatest American mixed martial artist of all time. Just what he's accomplished and what he's been able to do in his career. I mean, you go through and just see the fights that he's had and the wins that he's had and what he's done, and coming here at his age and to nearly walk away with the title. I mean, he was a punch or two away on 2 different occasions, and I saw a lot of people that actually did score the fight, for Dan Henderson, and said that, they think maybe he took 1, 2, and 5. I think Mike Bond had him taking 1, 2, and 5, and I didn't think he did enough in round 5, but still to be competing at the highest level at that age and being so close, and to you can't say enough about him, and man, you just think the fact, how long he's been around the game, man. I mean, this is somebody that really does date back to the early days of the sport. I mean, generations of martial art. I mean, how many guys have come and gone since the time that he stepped in? It's
right.
The longevity that he's been able to have is incredible. And then you throw in all his wrestling accomplishments and all that. Just a consummate professional, a stud that's done everything, man. It's a shame to see him go, but cool way to go out. You know what I mean? Like to go out in a way that you're like, he came to the press conference, didn't have a mark on his face.
Right.
Michael Bisping had to go to the hospital, and we've seen the pictures, and like it was scary. I mean, he was busted up, and he can kind of make a case. Hey, I kind of even thought I won. So to go out that way and say, man, I mean, it would have been the perfect story, of course, to be like, I won the UFC title, the one thing I'd always wanted. And then I walk away. But to go out the way he did, nothing wrong with it.
Anderson Silva, Luke Rockhold, Dan Henderson. I know we've got a few months left in 2016, John, but for me, and I'm not saying this because I'm British, but for me, Michael Bisping is the 2016 UFC/MMA Fight of the Year. Have you got any problem arguing that?
I don't see it. I mean, I guess maybe if Conor McGregor wins the title against Eddie Alvarez, then you start going, well, yes, he's 2-1.
Two-weight champion.
Yeah, but all 3 fights were outside of his division. The first fight with, I mean, there's an argument. But even then, to me, all you could say is it's an argument. I mean, yes, he would accomplish history by being the 2-division champion, but you can make the argument. You can't say for sure, But to me right now, yeah, it is Michael Bisping. I mean, yes, it's an aged Dan Henderson. Yes, it's an aged Anderson Silva, but they're both legends, and
I agree.
Just the emotions of the fight. I mean, I still think that Anderson Silva fight was one of my favorite fights of the year, one of my favorite fights I've ever been at, to be honest with you. Just the feel of the building, the ups and downs of the fight, the emotion behind it. It was theater playing out, in the cage, man. It was like a complete full story in there, And so, yeah, I think he is, and it's crazy, man. UFC middleweight champion Michael Bisping is not something I thought I'd ever see, and now we've seen it, and we've seen him defend it. It's
reigning
nuts.
and defending.
It's crazy.
So Michael Bisping, the first ever British UFC champion. If you're the UFC, John, how best do you use him? Do you maybe bring him back for, say, there's rumors of a London show in the first quarter of next year? Do you roll the dice again with the late start of the card here in the local crowd and for that North American pay-per-view market? Do you perhaps throw him into the mix and a stacked pay-per-view event next year based on America? How best do you utilize him?
I guess maybe you see how the numbers come back for this one, but to determine exactly. But I love putting him on that London show. I don't know if that's going to be a pay-per-view or a fight night or what it's supposed to be, but I love putting him in London. I mean, having him headline here in England is a no-brainer. Seeing the way people got behind him was incredible and amazing, and I think that would be fantastic to put him in London. I know that sometimes you overdo it with putting a guy in a market or whatever, but I just don't see another English headliner right now. So I think, putting him in a main event slot makes it big. It makes it important. And it gives, this market is still developing, as obviously you're very aware of. It's not quite where America is right now. It's a little bit behind. And so, I think you still need to give people a reason to get invested and to be involved. And I think the best way to do that is to keep, trotting out that English champion, and letting them see, like, look, this is our guy. We've got a dude that's the best in the world, and let's do that. Now, of course, it'll depend on how the matchups play out and what fight they decide to go with. But yeah, I'd love to see him in London. I don't know if they want to keep doing this middle of the night stuff. I mean, it worked and it's good, but I think you and I talked, beforehand. Part of it was kind of like the novelty, they're here. You're like, we got to go in the middle of the night, but that's kind of cool. We're going in the middle of the night. Like, I don't know, let's check that out. But like every time I got to go for a midnight start and get out with the sun rising at 6 a.m. I don't know how many times you buy tickets for that.
Oh, no, I completely agree with you. So, obviously, Bisping and Henderson are going to steal all the headlines, and rightly so. But is there a fighter, a story this week that's really kind of caught your eye? And is there something else, aside from the main event, that you think is something that people should talk about and read about tomorrow?
Well, I thought Gegard Mousasi looked really good. I know he's not in that top 4 of that, middleweight contender list right now, that very deep middleweight contender list. But I think he's right there behind him. So I think he looked great. Patient in his attack of Vitor Belfort, but then once he saw his opportunity, he just unleashed. So I thought that was a fantastic one to watch. Of course, Marty Akazi looks like the real deal. That was somebody that, we were hearing a lot of hype about coming in. I thought he really delivered. That's somebody you definitely want to keep your eye on. Enjoyed him. Leon Edwards, I thought, had a great performance tonight. So, a handful of Brits did some pretty cool stuff. And, of course, what didn't go his way with Danny Roberts, but a great fight with Mike Perry. I mean, that was a kind of a heck of a way to start out the night.
Yeah, and we talk about legend and Dan Henderson retiring. Another legend of the sport, Vitor Belfort. Things didn't go his way tonight. What do you think he's going to do next? There were a few rumors that, he was going to announce his retirement in the cage tonight, I saw online. Do you think he fights again? Do you think he calls it a day? What do you think?
I think it depends what matchups they come with him. And, I mean, he's still a huge star. I think he could possibly fight in Brazil. But if I had to guess right now, I think he wants to fight. I think we'll see what his family says around him. He's got a wife and kids that have been there from the beginning. Everything that I've ever been told is that he doesn't need to fight for money anymore. He's been incredibly financially successful in like business investments and things that he's done in Brazil, and so he doesn't have a need to fight again. And if he doesn't have a need to fight again, I don't think he should fight again. I just don't think it's there anymore. It's at least not at the highest level. I mean, if he wants to drop down and face some lower tier guys, maybe some kind of it's just so hard. I mean, the guy's such a star and he's been around forever, and what he's accomplished, like, it's not easy to be like, hey, we've got this guy that came off the Ultimate Fighter and he's 4-2, like, why don't you fight him? Like, what? So for that reason, I think it probably should be the last time we see him. I just think that he's such a superstar that he doesn't want to fight against anybody but top tier fighters. But the top tier of that middleweight division right now is deep.
Well, the next time the UFC is on pay-per-view is UFC 205. It's coming up right around the corner. I think the whole crew is going to be there. The UFC aired the official promo, which featured all the guys on that main card, all the title fight fighters, and I have to say it gave me some serious goosebumps. A great job by the UFC production team.
Pro Wrestling Mark.
I loved it. I loved it. I mean, you've seen some promos in your time, but when you saw that air, did it start to give you some of the?
It was good.
The goosies.
It was really good, man. It was really good. It was nice production for sure about it. It looked sharp, and yeah, man, I'm pumped for that card. That card is so good. I mean, it really is top to bottom, such a fantastic card. And it's funny for me. I was talking to somebody about this earlier, like, the whole Madison Square Garden thing. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I've never been to Madison Square. I only cover MMA, so I've never been there for a boxing event or a hockey. I've never been there, so I'm kind of excited about that. But to me, it's not like, I mean, it's the same show, just in a different venue. You know what I mean? So it doesn't excite me that much as far as just being in Madison Square Garden. It'll be a cool footnote. It'll be interesting, but it's not like the feature attraction for me.
Right.
The feature attraction is this ridiculous card, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I can't wait. Well, listen, we have to start to pack up our bags, and I don't know if you've got any time left to have another Godfather before we all depart for the week.
Probably figure something out.
But appreciate you jumping on, helping us out, and thanks for listening.
Okay, that was the Brit Pack episode number 12. Thanks again for listening. Hope you enjoyed it this week. A little bit different this week with some live audio from Octagonside. You can check us out on iTunes. You can check us out on Stitcher. And you can get us on Acast as well. But probably the easiest place to find us is on SoundCloud. SoundCloud.com/TheBritPack. And you'll find links to all of the places where you can subscribe to get the show each week. You can follow Sandhu on Twitter at Sandhu MMA. You can follow myself on Twitter at Simon Head. And of course you can follow the show's Twitter account at the BritPack MMA. We'll go back to a standard podcast format for next week's show. And we'll start the countdown to UFC 205. It's not long to go now before all eyes turn to Madison Square Garden in New York City for Conor McGregor as he steps in with Eddie Alvarez, looking to become the first ever UFC athlete to hold UFC World Championship belts in 2 weight classes simultaneously. Can he get the job done? We'll talk about that and a whole lot more on next week's show. Until then, thanks for listening, enjoy the fights, and we'll speak to you very soon.